Good afternoon, everyone. I'm very pleased to introduce our speaker today, Leticia Marteleto from the University of Texas at Austin. Leticia is a former colleague of mine when I was at UT, and I had the great fortune to get to know her during that time and get to see her career develop in ways that's just been extraordinary. A little bit about her background. After getting her degree in economics in Brazil, BA, she went on to get an MA in sociology at Bowling Green State University, and then went to University of Michigan for an MA in statistics and her PhD in sociology. She went back to Brazil for a postdoc. She's been going back and forth ever since, but then ended up at the University of Michigan in eventually into a tenure-track job in the School of Education at Michigan, and then Texas hired her away from Michigan in 2009. And in just 10 years at Texas, she's gone from new assistant professor there to just getting the vote for a full professor last couple of weeks or something. So she'll soon be promoted at Texas. It's not surprising if you look at her CV. She's publishing in all the top sociology journals, including Social Forces here at UNC, and in demography, population development review, and so forth. And has been funded by NICHD, NSF, and other funding agencies over the years. Today, it's a chance for us to hear about her fabulous new project on Zika and on health and fertility implications of the Zika epidemic in Brazil. Leticia was awarded as PI about a $4 million grant recently from NICHD to study this phenomenon in Brazil. She's assembled a huge team of people to help with that. She's designed the questionnaire right now. We'll be going in the field soon. So it's a major new study on a super important new topic in a part of the world in northeastern Brazil that needs this work done. So I'll turn it over to Leticia, and thank you for coming.
Yes, thank you. Well, thank you so much, Bob, for this kind introduction. I also want to thank you for being here. I'm delighted to be here. I've had great conversations this morning, and what an amazing center, CVC is, and with all the work you have. So I'm delighted to be here. So I'll be talking about live births and fertility throughout the Zika epidemic in Brazil. As Bob mentioned, this is part of this new grant, this R1, and we are about to start data collection in early 2020. So here's the roadmap for today. So I'll give you some context about the epidemic. The conceptual framework, fertility patterns in Brazil, how to think about fertility amidst this epidemic that took place. I'll talk a little bit about the project and what we are doing now and the next steps, but I hope to get to specific research questions that we already, hopefully we answered in this one paper. So my goal is really to give you a broad overview of the project and also to show you some results already that we have. Of course, not from the data we are collecting, but from Ministry of Health data on births. So then I'll talk about data and methods, our results and conclusions, and I'll throw in some next steps for the project. So Zika. Zika first appeared in Pacific Islands in 1947, a while back. So Zika is not new in that sense, right? So it appeared since then on and off in some places, but never with the strength or with the link with microcephaly that it appeared in Brazil. So again, so Zika is not new, but the way it appeared, and I'll show in a minute, is new. The symptoms of Zika are fever, rash, joint pain, muscular pain, headache. They last from 2 to 8 days. And in about 80% of the cases, Zika is asymptomatic. So that brings texture to this, to studying the consequences of something that people might not even know they have, right, or they had. No vaccine or treatment is widely available for the virus since the epidemic. There have been some trials and tested and etc., but there's nothing widely available. Zika is mainly transmitted by the Aedes aegypti mosquito. It's the same mosquito that transmits dengue, chikungunya, some cases of yellow fever. Zika can also be transmitted through sexual intercourse, blood transfusions, and I think most importantly through the amniotic fluid, pregnant women, right, who transmit to the babies. For fetuses, Zika can lead to microcephaly or congenital Zika syndrome. So when the epidemic started in 2015, all we talked about was microcephaly, but then it was discovered that microcephaly, which is brain malformation, is just one case, one type of issue that Zika might bring to fetuses. So then the term became congenital Zika syndrome right after, because it's not only, microcephaly is the most important, but it's not the only one. So in that context, reproductive age women face dire consequences, right, during pregnancy for the health of their children. And you can imagine the adverse consequences for not knowing, right, for women who are pregnant or who became pregnant during this epidemic. And that brought that brought certainly risk and uncertainty around reproduction during that time, right? So in Brazil, the first cases of Zika first appeared in late 2014, precisely in the Northeast. And so medical doctors were the ones who first, said, wait, there's something here. It's not really dengue. The symptoms are very similar to dengue. And dengue is widely, there's high incidence rates of dengue in Brazil, but there's something else here. To date, there's about 230,000 suspected cases of Zika and 140,000 cases confirmed of Zika, with all the caveats that I told you, like the difficulty to diagnose and etc. So this is from the Ministry of Health, just to give you a flavor of what happened when we get this. So we have the 2016 curve right there, and then 2017. Why we say probable? Because of the issues that I just told you. Zika, notification of Zika became mandatory in February of 2016 only in Brazil. And that's why we have that peak there that we're seeing there, right? So really 2016, and then it leveled. And what we see now is that there's ongoing transmission of Zika. Infection, it is still going on. Each time I talk about my research, people ask, so what's going to happen? Is Zika going to come back? Are we going to have an epidemic, etc.? What I can say is that, let me go back. What I can say from entomologists and epidemiologists is that much like dengue, Zika is cyclical, right? It's cyclical. So there is a chance that we will have something like the epidemic we had in the past, but it's not certain. But it continues to be endemic and transmitted in Brazil. Again, difficult to diagnose. And it's important to keep in mind key regional differences on the onset and the severity of the epidemic in Brazil's large territory. So it really started out in the Northeast. If you think about Brazil, the Northeast is lower levels of development, SCS, Northeast, and the South and Southeast are, I'm being simplistic here, but more developed, etc. So it really started in the Northeast. And also most cases of microcephaly happened in the Northeast as well. In the majority of the initial cases, as I said, in the Northeast. So this is, to give you a flavor, this is the density of estimates of Zika cases in Brazil. Again, those are not reported cases. So this is an estimation of the probable Zika cases. And you can see here, so this is 2015, this is 2016. So, the Northeast and Southeast here, and then when we look at 2016, it's way more spread out. Actually, not funny, but an interesting point is that you would ask, what about the Amazon, right? In addition to the fact that the Amazon is burning, there's not much reported Zika in the Amazon, and one reason scientists say that it is because the yellow fever mosquito kind of competes. The malaria mosquito competes with the Aedes aegypti, and there's a mosquito competition there. That's I'm not a specialist on that one, but that's one of the reasons why they say there's not much in the Amazon. So the WHO in 2017 in their report at the end of the epidemic, the Zika epidemic in Brazil, reported that Zika will continue to threaten the Americas in a cyclical fashion, as I told you, right? Dengue is usually 3 years, right, the cycle. So in February of this year, the Pan American Health Organization called for Latin American countries to prepare for dengue fever outbreaks this year. And in Brazil, this is going on right now. Like there's a dengue outbreak pretty much spread out in the country. So what that tells us doing this kind of research is that the mosquito is there. It's widespread. So that if we think that the perceptions, right? I mean, the perception of high infestation is there, right? So just to summarize, pre-2014, lots of dengue outbreaks in Brazil, the emergence of cases of Zika in the Northeast in 2014, evidence of increasing cases of microcephaly from medical doctors in the state of Pernambuco. Then in November 2015, the Ministry of Health confirms the link between Zika and microcephaly. And when I say confirms, it's not true. It wasn't settled back then, but they declared publicly that there was a link. Medical doctors went to the media and very clearly said there's a link between the Zika epidemic that's going on and this baby is being born with brain malformation. So then, this is what we saw in the media, right? Health alerts in South American Caribbean, the fear of illness that, that may cause birth deformities. Brazil warns women not to get pregnant as Zika virus is linked to rare birth defects. So Zika was everywhere. And this fear, this message of fear of babies being born with this brain malformation, covers of magazines, in airports. I have a biased view, but every time I was in an airport, traveling internationally, there were signs if you were in countries that were infected by Zika and this and that. So it was really, really, really everywhere. So with that, in that November 2015, what we saw was an influx of messages for women, recommending women not to get pregnant, right? Again, the evidence of the case control studies that confirm that, that's debatable if it came a little later or not. But the fact was this is what we got, the message that we got. As much as in that November 2015, if you get Google searches for the word microcephalia in Portuguese, which is microcephaly, this is what we get, right? So you have all this influx of people not really knowing what's going on, but having a kind of a sense, well, there's these mosquitoes, women get Zika, they get pregnant, those babies are born with brain malformation. In the end, after the end of the epidemic, about 3,000 cases were confirmed of microcephaly, about 20% of them happening in this state of Pernambuco, where we'll be collecting data. Because Brazil has historically had outbreaks of dengue, and the Aedes aegypti is everywhere, pretty much. Brazilians are familiar with this kind of message, which is look for pots, water, plants. Don't leave water there. Or in your backyard, don't leave tires, like, those tires, because those things accumulate water. Right, and this mosquito the Aedes likes clean and warm weather, and it thrives in that environment. So this is the kind of message that, sort of like the pamphlet that was spread out back then. But it added one interesting, let's clean, and then the pregnant, very focused on the women, sort of like the agency of women, right? And pregnant women. This is saying, if you are pregnant, protect, do your prenatal, but if you want to get pregnant, talk to your doctor. And we did interviews back then with what the messages, this would be for another talk, but what messages doctors and healthcare providers were sending to women at that time and what was going on. It's very interesting. So the public health campaigns focused on women and focused on the mosquito. But the mosquito in a very individualist, I mean, it's on you, it's on the individual. It's not on the government, it's not, you know, it's on you to protect yourself and protect us from this disease. I was there at some point during the epidemic, and there were even apps developed with checklists for the things. So for example, have you checked the plants? You know, to see if there's a mosquito. Have you checked the vase? Have you checked, you know, any materials in your house that accumulate water? So apps. This is a picture of sort of like hotels combating the mosquito. You know, so this was really widespread. A little bit more with Zika and microcephaly, the danger is even higher. Sort of like, you all know the drill for with respect to dengue, but with microcephaly and Zika, it's way more dangerous now. So just to add here, then there was at the end of 2015, in 2016, the WHO declared Zika public health emergency of international concern. Mandatory notification started, and in 2017, the WHO projects that Zika will continue to threaten the Americas in a cyclical fashion. The mosquito is still there, and 2019 now, the CDC still classifies Brazil as an area with current and past active transmission, and there have been dengue fever outbreaks all over. So in light of all of this, while we are, the way we are framing the project is there have been major threats, wars, natural disasters, economic crises, epidemics, and this brings uncertainty, and they bring reevaluations of reproductive desires and intentions. In these moments of uncertainty and crisis, and etc. Then women might devise strategies to decrease the risk of infection or decrease or full-term pregnancy. So there are consequences for reproductive outcomes here. Zika is a direct threat to fetuses in that. So 5 to 10% of infected women, the babies are born with some form of congenital Zika syndrome, microcephaly. Yet it's mostly harmless for adults. I say harmless because of Guillain-Barré syndrome. And I mean, I'm not saying that if you get Zika, it's not painful, dengue, body aches and all that, but it's not linked necessarily with a high death rate for adults. So it brings an interesting perspective on this. And also the fact that Aedes is a familiar mosquito to Brazilians. It's a very familiar mosquito. So there might have been an initial sense of trivialization of the virus, sort of like, you know, I've been dealing with this forever, who cares about this? At least until the link was established or suggested in that November 2015. Lots of unknowns, which makes the roles of exposure to risk, access to information. You can think of uncertainty, lack of control with perceptions, how SES also plays, you know, into all of this. And the threat is ongoing with the continuous vector infestation and new Zika cases showing up in the media also to this day. So the decoding Zika, the main goal is to understand the consequences, the demographic consequences of the epidemic, but also taking into account the fact that Brazil is one of the most unequal, has been for a long time and continues to be one of the most unequal countries in the world. So we want to flesh out, you know, with this epidemic, with this shock, what you know, I mean, have inequities socioeconomic inequities declined, accentuated in terms of reproductive health outcomes. So it's also Brazil is a large country with many differences, and I'm going to show you a little bit of the consequences of that today. And as I told you a second ago, with differences in the onset and severity of this epidemic as well, right, across that large territory. So we'll be examining live births, fertility, reproductive processes across SES differences, and we want to identify mechanisms and mediators with the broad project. So in terms of data collection, I'll tell you what we have done already. We've seed grants from the Population Research Center at UT. We did focus groups in 2 Brazilian capitals in July, August of 2016. We stratified, so we chose a capital with high incidence and one with lower. And we did focus groups with high versus low SES women, and that's a PDR piece that came out last year, 2 years ago. We did a survey in Recife, which is in the state of Pernambuco in 2017, with 1,600 women. As a way to test our questionnaire, get some preliminary data. And then we've been doing since then secondary data analysis, getting data from the live births from the Brazilian Ministry of Health for all 5,571 municipalities in the country. So we have monthly data for each municipality on live births. Arboviruses cases, so we've been merging this data with live births, arboviruses, climate, precipitation and temperature, and socioeconomic information at the municipality and state levels. So we are adding all that information. The next step is a panel with 4,000, about give and take, women, ages 15 to 34 in urban Pernambuco, and in early 2020, and a follow-up by phone with very short questionnaire, and also to help minimize attrition in May 2020, and a second wave a year later of interview. I want to highlight that there has been, regardless of Zika, there is no panel data on women reproductive health and outcomes for that country ever. So this will be the first one. We are stratifying by municipalities by exposure to the risk of infection during the epidemic. So the epidemiologists in the team are developing a scale, a risk scale of exposure, and we want to sample from high versus low exposure to risk during the epidemic. And we are asking a few retrospective questions, current and prospective data as well. So this is what's coming. And so just to give you a flavor, of the varying risk, this is just dengue, and our risk scale will be more complex than that. But this is the state of Pernambuco, and these are all municipalities. So just to give you a flavor of what that, looks like. I mean, there is variation in terms of how hard these municipalities were hit during the epidemic. So just to talk a little bit more about the inequalities, just to get into inequities in fertility. The same way that Brazil has shown persistent levels of inequality in terms of socioeconomic status and geographic differences, they are reflected in fertility. So the TFR in Brazil is 1.8. There's 1.8 difference between high versus low SES. And what we've seen recently is also low fertility among high SES and declining fertility among low SES. So that's, and I'll show you in a second. So we are seeing declining fertility among low SES. So if in the 70s and 80s, the disparity in fertility between high and low SES was huge, now it's been shrinking. Same thing with geographic disparities. So it's expected, right? I mean, you reach low, and that's but just to give you a flavor. The unintended births, the proportion, it's 50% of the births are unintended. So it is very high, and it makes this even more interesting, right? I mean, the Ministry of Health was saying, don't have babies, but at the same time, half of the births are unintended. So yeah. Brazil also has a very young fertility schedule. extremely young for such a low, it's below replacement level, the TFR. Very young for that kind of level of fertility. The fertility mode in Brazil is have a child young, have the second and stop. So it's not wait and have the first. So it's an interesting case in terms for those of us who study fertility to look at because of that as well, right? So just to some evidence from the PDR paper on inequities in fertility, all women were concerned with Zika and microcephaly, both groups of women, high and low SES, but women in the Northeast mentioned microcephalic babies and exposure to risk, but they would say, yes, I'm worried with microcephaly and Zika. I would be more worried and I would act if I were trying to get pregnant, but I'm not trying to get pregnant. Well, 50% of the births are unintended, you know, so it's interesting in that context. All right, so now I'm gonna turn, so this was sort of like the larger project and what we've done. Now I wanna turn into one specific paper and trying to look at this research questions. What are the responses in live births and fertility of the Zika epidemic in Brazil? So like what happened, right? I mean, I told you all of this and we all would expect something would happen, but what did really happen? And it's a spoiler, the number of live births went down in 2016. So we want to see, I mean, as I have some collaborators who are formal demographers, and they were like, okay, but we have to check if this is net of potential changes in structure of the population or at reproductive ages. And I was like, okay, but it doesn't change. I mean, the age structure of a population doesn't change in a year, but you know, anyway, so we are, yeah, that's the formal demographer side. Do the responses differ by the onset of the epidemic and by socioeconomic status? Yes or no, right? So I would expect when I started looking into this that we would see faster declines in states where the epidemic hit first. Also at the same time, these are the states where fertility has been highest still. So there's that too. And so this is what I'm gonna try to show you in the next 15 minutes. Also, is there a difference in the fertility trends by socioeconomic status? So again, this is similar to the maps that I showed you a couple of minutes ago of the Zika, the density estimates of the probability of Zika. These are the density estimates of microcephaly cases. So this is September 2015 to April 2016, and then May 2016, November 2016. And this is what we see. So in the first wave, they call this the two waves. There are two waves of the epidemic. So we see the majority of the cases in the Northeast. Some here, that's Rio here. And then in 2016, it's way more spread out. I'm not going to show you this, but it's very interesting that there are also places where you see high Zika, you know, high numbers of Zika cases below microcephaly and vice versa. So although we know Zika has been found to lead to microcephaly, it's more complex and than that. Yeah. So I'm going to show you results for Pernambuco and Santa Catarina. I'm going to show results for the entire country and then just for these two states. And the rationale here is there were initially more cases of microcephaly. I mean, there were more cases of microcephaly in Pernambuco, but it hit first. Santa Catarina, if you look, there's almost nothing here and there's almost nothing there. So it was not, you know, very affected. At least in terms of number of cases. And this is the cumulative distribution of the confirmed cases overall up to 2018. So again, we see very red here for the Northeast states and Santa Catarina, again, almost nothing there. All right, so are those responses net of fixed municipality characteristics related to the onset of the epidemic. So in addition to estimating TFRs and age-specific fertility rates and all those things, we also model live births using just a Poisson, a simple Poisson fixed effects. And we want to see if the declines start or accelerate in different months in different states. And so the data, again, so it's data from SINASCI, Ministry of Health, 5,570, I think it's 5,71, I'll look this up, but it's from 2014 and 15 and 16. We use, we get the projections by the Census Bureau of the number of women of childbearing ages. To make things more complicated, doing research in Brazil is complicated, but to make things more complicated, there's no projector for a denominator at the municipality level monthly. So we had to estimate those. So we got the main projections, but we had to estimate our own at the municipality level by month to be our denominator for our live birth rates. We get data from CINAM, the confirmed cases of microcephaly and dengue fever. This, in the analysis that I'm showing you today, we are not doing, I'm not showing analysis today on this. This is sort of like a next step in that we have the confirmed cases of microcephaly by municipality by month, and we are also working with that separately, like to see if there's any, like when it goes up, what happens. All right. So for the first research questions, we first look at live births and changes, you know, like just trends. We calculate the age-specific fertility rates and the TFRs. I felt great doing this. I felt like I was going back to my formal, you know, like to my demography side, and so this is great. We also calculate the GFRs. The GFRs, just live births and the women as a denominator. The GFRs are very sensitive to age distribution, and that's why we do that. Here in this case, we calculate different scenarios, and I'll show you in a second. Then for the second research questions, we do the same thing as before, but by the two different states and by women's level of education. And then for our models, we just model monthly live birth rates, municipality Poisson fixed effects. We include month and years, and we just simply test the significance of difference between coefficients. It's just a simple test and to see if the gap accelerates and when it accelerates. So it's just a trend again. So we don't have additional information or additional data sets by municipality by month either to even include, but these are fixed effects. So we just compare them. So country level results. All right, so this is for the whole country. I'll show you live births for 2014, 2015, and 2016 by month. And so this is 2014 and 2015. Very similar, some seasonality. We know that births, you know, I mean, there's the seasonality there has been documented. When we get, and this is the bars here are the percent change, simply. Okay, so not much change between 2014 and 2015. This is the gray bar there. And then I'll show you, so I mean, not much difference. It's a little bit of a confusing graph because we have two y-axes, but just walk you through this. So this is live births for 1,000 women, and then when I show you the bars, that's the percent change from 2014 to 2015. That's the gray bar there. Now, reminding you that the link between Zika and microcephaly was announced, and remember the Google searches in November 2015, right? So when I started looking at this, my main motivation was, first, was there a change? And second, if there was a change, depending on when the change happened, was this abortion, was this miscarriage, was this contraceptive, what was the mechanism, right? So this is what we see in 2016. So we see that it's here, right? Like June 2016, that the curve for 2016 really starts to be different, to really go down. And if we think November to June, it's about 7 months, and then 8, 9, and then it accentuates, right? And then until it gets to 12 months, which is the other line right there. I'm not inferring that it's one thing or the other at this point, but this is what we have, and in red, this is the percent change for the entire country. Okay. All right. So given that, and again, as I told you, so my more formal demographer colleagues was like, okay, let's just calculate the GFR. And so this is a simple exercise. We have the observed number of live births, the observed number of females aged 15 to 49. And we see here that if anything, the number of women at childbearing ages is increasing, right? So we would not expect if behavior became continued to be more or less the same, we would expect the same, same. I mean, that's what we see. So we calculate the GFR in 2010, and then we calculate the expected number, of course, if the GFR remained the same, just sort of like playing with it. And what we see is that the relative, there's a relative difference, and there's births missing. We see this number of births missing. So it's, it's not really age structure. Then for the next set of questions, we calculated the age-specific fertility rates, and then the total fertility rate. It's the FT because in Portuguese it's, yeah, anyways, I'm mixing languages there. So, all right, so we have the observed 2015, and then the expected 2016. And what is the expected? If fertility continued the way that the Brazil Census Bureau had projected. And then we have the observed 2016. And if we get the observed and expected, the differences are small, and they should be, right? If we think about the total fertility rate, because it's a year, right? We cannot tell even if this is going to be tempo or quantum, right? I mean, we think, I'll show you later, this is a shock, a 1 point in time shock. But so this is expected that it's going to be small, but it kind of points us in the direction that it is the younger women, as one would expect too, because, and also we've heard that in our focus groups, older women with sort of like the reproductive window being smaller, right, went ahead and had babies. All right, so this is what we get. A small change, but a change in the total fertility rate. Then we look into women with different levels of education, low, medium, and high. So for the low, it's the same rationale as the graph that I had shown you before, except that this is 2015 only. I don't show 2014. This figure would be too, it's already, there's too much going on here, but so 2015, and then this is 2016 for low educated women. And this is very interesting because it's low educated women. And so this is the change between 14 and 15, and then the change between 15 and 16. So even among low educated women, we see the trend, right? I mean, the decline. If we have medium, then before it was kind of going up, but I mean, very low, as I had told you, the pattern, and there's a change. I find this amazing because it's a change in the trend. I mean, it was a small trend there, but it is a change. Highly educated women, a change, but a change happening like right there. So my interpretation of this is that high educated women were able to adjust their number of births rather quickly when they learned about this new, potentially, consequential disease. And this is what we are seeing here. Does it make sense? I know there's a lot here in this figure, but that's what we see. So then we calculated the age-specific and TFRs for women of different levels of education. And so this is low education, medium, and high. So again, what we see is that even low education, we see, it's small, again, it's a year, so we cannot push too much, but we do see change there in all these 3 groups. All right, so then the other question I had was regarding Northeast and Southeast. And so Pernambuco and Santa Catarina. So we do the same exercise. And so this is Santa Catarina in the south. So this is live births in 2015, live births in 2016. So this is the change we see. Now, if we get and this is the percent change. If we get Pernambuco, this was live births in 2015, live births in 2016. So this is one of the states mostly affected and affected first, and this is what we see in Pernambuco. The change there. Okay, so again, I cannot claim. This is evidence of the trends, right? That's all I'm saying here. These are the trends, and we calculated fertility and live births and etc. We didn't go on to calculate TFRs for the states because we run into other. We would have to go like by Asian, and we run into others, smaller areas, etc. But this is what we have so far. Now, if we look into the difference for each month, the gap, right? And so this is the entire country, and so the gap really, as we saw, this is no news, accentuated in mid 2016. And then just the difference in the decline in the acceleration. If we compare July 2015 versus any month later, this is November is the month in which we really see the peak of the acceleration. If we do the same exercise for the 4 countries, and red is sort of like the largest acceleration, it's really Rio Grande do Norte and Pernambuco, which are 2 states in the Northeast, and not so much going on in Santa Catarina and Paraná. Now, I'm not saying, this is, to be fair, the places fertility was lower here than in those 2 states in the Northeast. So there's only so much that you can go, but here we are calculating change, right? We are estimating change and acceleration in that gap. So if we look into the different states, it really is November, and Rio Grande do Norte and Pernambuco are the 2 with the highest statistics there. Okay, so what do we make of this, and what's lacking, and what what we are doing? So I've shown you that there were declines in live births, and those declines were stratified by SES and state. And again, SES, it's really mother's education in that case, and state. High SES women acted fast. They reversed the trend in the middle of 2016. They really did reverse the trend. There was a slight drop in fertility, again, a year, but that seems to be stratified. So it seems that younger women are the ones really who acted, which is unsurprising. And that the declines started earlier and were larger in northeastern states. Is there going to be a catch-up effect? Is the next question that we have, is this a quantum versus a tempo effect? What's going on here? So this is preliminary data for 2017. By now, it must be fine. Now I have to go back and look into this. But so this here is the line for 2017. And this is the line that I had shown you previously, right? The 2014, 2015, 2016. So what we see is leveling back to those levels, right, of 2014 and 15, but not really surpassing it, right? I mean, they're leveling back, but not being higher to account for those births potentially. So that's interesting, and it's something that the team is working now to get this data in the final format from the ministry. So what we also see is this has the potential to reproduce and perpetuate inequalities in reproductive health and fertility, and geographical inequalities that have been ongoing in the country. I have many people that I've been working with in this project. I want to acknowledge 3 co-authors in this one, last part analysis that I showed you. Raquel Coutinho, who did her, Zanata Coutinho, who did her PhD here in your program, and Gilvan Guedes. They are both at CEDEPLAR. They are both in Brazil. And Abigail Weitzman, who is a colleague at UT. But in terms of collaborators, I have wonderful collaborators, and I'm grateful to so many people who have been, giving me advice. And it's a large project. It's very exciting. It's a lot of work. And yeah, thank you. Yeah, this is what
We got about 12 minutes or so.
Yeah, please go for it. I tried to pack as much as I could about the project, but also about this one paper. Yes.
This is a really interesting talk too. Thank you. I was wondering if you could give us more context of what the context of sex education and culturally beliefs around abortion. How is the access to different forms of contraception in this context?
Yeah. How do you take many questions, or I go one by one? I mean, it's one by one. Thank you. Thank you for your question. So in terms of sex education, what's interesting, so I respond first sex education, then contraception, and abortion, and tragedy. So something that's going on in Brazil right now too is Brazil has a very, how can I put it, right-wing president leader right now, and lots of those things have been shut down, and so that's going on in terms of that. I've seen content analysis also of the materials that the ministry released during the epidemic in terms of contraception and etc. And it's 2 reports. There's nothing. I mean, there's almost nothing. But during the epidemic, the whole mechanism to prevent infection advertised by the by the country, the government, was really bug spray and not really contraception. So I don't know if that, so there's that during the epidemic. At the same time, the country does have a public health system that I consider, I mean, it does exist. The fact that there's one is something, and that does offer contraception with limited reach and limited methods. But one could get birth control pills for free, theoretically, if a woman wanted. There are the clinics in the neighborhoods that women could get, and there's something called Farmácia Popular, which is sort of like a popular pharmacy or something, where one could get free or low rate contraceptives in the normal pharmacies if they work. What we hear is that those don't work. I mean, in theory, that's what happens in theory, but that's not. And the 2 modes of contraceptive use, there are the motor ones are really birth control pills and condoms. Those are the 2 main ones right now. So that's the second question. Now, abortion, right? Abortion is illegal in Brazil. So it does happen, and it's very skewed by SES, of course, access to safe abortion. It's mainly done with misoprostol, right? So one can get misoprostol pills and perform an abortion. And that there has been a lot of literature on that. One of my co-investigators, Abby Aiken, she wrote a paper, very interesting, showing that during the epidemic, there has been an increase in requests for misoprostol through online services. I don't know if you've seen, and so she looked into some countries in Latin America because there was Zika, like Colombia had Zika too, and others. And Brazil was one that she showed that she and her colleagues showed that there was an increasing request for misoprostol. So we know that there's something going on, in terms of abortion. Yeah, I just don't think, I don't know if that's where you were going, but I just don't think that there would have been enough to for us to see that then that we saw. That's
I was just curious, like if the government's saying don't get pregnant, well, contextually, what resources do you have to do that?
It's a dissonant discourse, right? Don't get pregnant, but I'm not gonna necessarily, right? So in the focus groups, women mentioned, it has been reported, this is not new and it's not context related in terms of the Zika epidemic, that even if women have access, they don't use, or they don't, or it's a hassle to get it, or in our focus groups, women mentioned the use of the pill incorrectly. But this is again not new to this, but we've heard stories, and we maintain, my child is my number 2 child is the child of the pill, and over and over. But again, it's not new. But in the context of the Zika epidemic, it's a dissonant. Yeah, thank you.
I've got 2 questions, one following up on that and one broader. Following up on that, the other thing I know about Brazil is that they have a lot of sterilization. So the kind of typical pattern in contraceptive use is have a couple of kids use pills from the pharmacies, and then when you go to second one, get sterilized. That's still the case. So in that sense, the seeing the effect in the younger women it would be kind of expected because a lot of the older women would already be sterilized. So that was just further one comment on that. And I was actually interested in the misoprostol and how much that was going up. But then you see the impact 7 to 9 months later. So that suggests a lot of it's in life. But so I was just kind of interested in those kind of dynamics and how this is interacting with the whole method mix and stuff, which you partially addressed. The other question I had was on a bigger picture question, was really in terms of globally, how much Zika is endemic also in Africa as well, but is it more in the Americas, and is the brain malformations mostly in the Americas, and what's the situation in kind of other countries which have dengue and endemic Zika?
Yeah, well, thank you for both sets of questions. So one, in terms of sterilization, just a comment, yes, true, very true. So sterilization, and we are going to include, in our sample, we want to include women who were sterilized just after 2015, because they would be sterilized because of the epidemic, but not. But yeah, absolutely true. And very interesting pattern, of course. So in terms of your second question of Zika and microcephaly in other places, so the Americas were really the places where Zika hit. There were reports of Zika in India, in Angola, because of the Portuguese influence, the language, right? And in other places in Africa, but it really hit countries in the Americas. And there have not been, to my knowledge, reports of significant, or epidemic-like number of cases of Zika or of microcephaly in other places. Colombia is another place in the Americas where Zika hit, and where there have been significant increases in microcephaly. Puerto Rico also, in the US, as we know, the south of the US, there were some, but this was pretty much it. It hasn't, at least that I have seen, not significant numbers of. At some point, I thought in looking into Angola because Zika had been reported, and I felt, well, maybe I will be able to either get a grant or start a research or something when the epidemic that would be so interesting, right? I mean, to start the study right in the beginning of potential epidemic, but this kept me busy enough, and then it didn't turn out to be very significant, the number of cases, and very isolated. And they, everything I read suggested that Angola, because they speak Portuguese and the influence of travelers been coming from Brazil to Angola, which would be fascinating to look, you know, but I haven't pursued that, so I don't know. Yeah. Thank you.
To what extent do the policy environments between the federative units within Brazil vary that may affect fertility and perhaps the response to the Zika virus?
That's very interesting. And I looked into sort of like the responses and the policy. And in the case of Brazil, it's very localized at the state. Mm-hmm. So there was variation in how the states responded. Some municipalities, but more state. And so I have some systematic sort of analysis on some of that. But in general, the focus has been on combating the mosquito. It has been on the mosquito, very much doing the same that has been done for dengue, for the mosquito, adding the pregnant woman there. And in the Northeast, because it hit first and etc., I would say, and from what I've seen, it has been stronger in the states in the Northeast, to the extent that I'm trying to get information on, so there are agents, state agents that go into people's houses to check for the things that I described, you know, like the tires, the things, those kinds of things. And this has been very common in the past decades, I want to say, but it intensifies with the summer in some place, with the rainy season in some places. And so there is variation in sort of like the number of agents that go out, the reports that they get. So that's one sort of like more specific answer to your question. And the other one, which I've spent a lot of time looking into, and then I haven't done much, which is, so the municipalities developed this index of mosquito infestation as a policy, like to look, so they would be able to look into the neighborhoods that have higher levels of mosquito infestation. So that's something that also it has been a way. So they put traps spread out throughout the neighborhoods, and they collect the mosquitoes, and they count, they do the whole entomologist kind of thing, but that has been another way of like a response or a policy that has been, or an indicator for policy that I've seen going around. I don't know if that answers specifically, but that's, yeah, thank you.
What does the data look like for occurrences of microcephaly before the outbreak and then after? Oh, that's a good question. So there was microcephaly before, and that those have been reported, and etc. And so it's like 0.01% of the babies were born with microcephaly, and now we had like 3,000 cases due to Zika, but there is still microcephaly for other reasons. And in our analysis, we do have that information. In the data, we do have that information of live births or microcephaly, live births with microcephaly. Another answer to your question is that in addition to information on microcephaly in the live birth record, there is also in February 2016, the government started, I forget the acronym, but another way of collecting the same data. So we've been working to put those two together as well for consistency. Yeah.
Would anybody like the last question? No.
Yeah, just to follow up with the number of cases. So you say that Zika is a cyclical thing, so we can probably anticipate or prepare something similar is going to happen. But given what we know now, that we have roughly over 3,000 confirmed cases of microcephaly, and the annual number of births in Brazil is roughly 3 million-ish. So basically, it's 1 per 1,000. Is that a risk justified for the government to advise people, hey, don't get pregnant?
That's a good, I mean, it's a subjective question. It's a good question. I think the consequence, if you look at the numbers, you have one kind of answer. If you look at what happens to these families and those babies, I think we get another kind of answer, because it becomes very difficult for those families and for those babies. And so I would say it does, at least in the areas where it is endemic and there's still ongoing transmission. Yeah. So I think an N of 1 would be, you know what I mean? Because the consequences are, I mean, we have a cohort right now. And so I would say yes.
Okay. So with that, I want to thank you very
Yeah.
much.